Well, hello, this is Lyndon Peterson here, and welcome to Beyond the Stage podcast. It's quite a journey for me, and I'm blessed to be able to present this to you. I've grown up in the Christian community for many years. I'm 47 years old now. Since 16 years old, I've been involved in ministry, serving, being a blessing to the church. Those of you who know me, know my background. This is me in a nutshell and what the journey has been like over the last 2 or so years. I'm blessed to be able to have conversations with you beyond the stage. You know, I've grown up on the stage and been privileged to lead many people in worship, sing on many platforms. But really where life matters is the things that happen beyond the stage that really form who we are and what we're about. So please join me on this journey. I'm looking forward to walking this out with you. If you have anything to comment on or give me feedback on, I'd love to hear from you so that we can help each other walk out this journey and destiny in life. So today I'm in this beautiful place, lovely setting here in Randburg. It's Pantelli's Italian Kitchen. So if you're around the area in Randburg, Ricky and his team will welcome you, and you're most welcome to come around. And all the details will also be in the show notes, so pay attention to that. Also, we've got the amazing guys on the camera crew today, and I do want to mention them, Peter, Andre, and Pierre from Active Blue. If you need any assistance with camera work in your churches or whatever facility, please hook them up. Their details will also be in the show notes. But we're going to get on with today's program, and I'm very excited. As I said earlier on, the last 2 years has been very interesting for me. It's been stepping away from familiar ground, stepping away from everything that I've known for the last, it's been about 30 years. Right after school, I started being involved in ministry, church ministry. There were three things that I loved after school. Number one was my passion for music. Number two was my passion for people. And number three was my passion for God. And so those aligned in a beautiful way, found me getting right involved right after school in ministry. And the journey has had many ups, some downs, but I've grown and I've learned and I've cut my teeth really in the ministry background. With me today, I have a friend, a pastor, friend of mine that's really been instrumental in my life in many ways. He married me and my precious wife 13 years ago. He's been instrumental in my life in stepping down from ministry, helping me, directing me, often confronting me, loving on me. And so I just want to welcome to the podcast today, Beyond the Stage, Alan Plant, Pastor Alan Plant.
Hey, thanks. Great to be here, Lyndon.
Thank you for being here. And, you know, Pastor Al, we have these conversations for the last 2 years, and even before that, we've had conversations like this all the time.
Yeah.
And it's been really good conversation. So we, in many ways, are bringing people into our conversation. When I ask, first of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much for coming, for agreeing to come, and just being here, being a part of the journey with me. I so love you and appreciate you. Pastor Alan is married, of course. He's got 2 children, Jesse and Matthew. And he's also been involved in ministry for many years. Now, I know a lot about you, but there's a lot I probably don't know about you too. And that the people don't know about you either. So would you mind giving us a bit of a background as to Alan Plant, Pastor? By the way, you are so amazing, obviously, at what you do. But you're so, I need to give you your flowers. There's a saying that they say, we're going to give you your flowers, okay? So underrated, not undervalued at all, because you know who you are as a person, as a man, as a child of God. But so just in the background, doing your thing, but you actually really are incredible in who you are and what you do, in what you deliver, what the value you bring to people's lives, what you brought to my life and so many others. And so I think I publicly want to say thank you and just kind of give you your flowers and go, you're actually flipping amazing. I shouldn't even say actually.
Yeah, sometimes it's awkward to hear those things, I guess, but I appreciate it. I love what I do. And so for me, being part of just telling people about Jesus, and I think the greatest story that the world has ever known is just a privilege. And I think so often we lose sight of it. We lose sight of the gospel. We lose sight of what it means And just to be reminded and just to come back to that, I think is so important for all of us, no matter where we are in our journey. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying, folks? He's just so, like, he goes right to the point. Never mind about me. But tell us a little bit more about your background,
Sure.
your childhood.
Grew up in church. I was one of those kids who fell asleep under the chairs.
Okay.
From as early as I can remember. Grew from there into just being involved in youth and young adult ministry.
Okay.
Got involved in a Christian organization at university when I studied there.
Okay.
From there, ended up doing a 1-year mission stint in Russia, 94, 95. Came back and got involved in a family business for a few years.
Okay.
From there, started doing Bible college at Rhema,
Yes.
which was 99. Did that for 3 years, and then off the back of that, stepped straight into helping Pastor Harold Black as a zone pastor in Rhema. Served there for, I guess, 12 years.
Wow.
And then when Pastor Josh and Tara were released to go and start Redemption Church, I went with them. That's 11 years ago now. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. But I've enjoyed it, and God's been faithful, and it's important to follow Him because He knows best, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Did you study tertiary? Did you?
I did. I studied botany and zoology. So with my name, it's quite interesting.
What is that?
Botany is study of plants, right?
Okay.
Excuse me. Funny story, quickly.
Sure.
My first prac I ever did. You had to write your initial and your surname on the desk where you were going to study for the rest of the year.
Okay.
Our tutor then gave us some other tasks, came back, and he gathered us all. He said, "Who's the practical joker?" Because my name was a plant, right? And he never really recovered the fact that I took out my student ID and said to him, "That's actually my name." It was hard for him.
Oh my goodness.
You can imagine.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. That is so interesting. And how many years was that?
3 years, but I did it over 4. I squeezed a 3-year degree into 4.
Okay, that's interesting. Hey, we all have our things, right?
Exactly.
We all have our things. That's interesting. That's an interesting analogy because you very much are involved, obviously, in pastoring all these years, and I'm sure you've used the plant analogy and growth and fertilizer and all of that stuff in people's lives. So I mean, it's no coincidences, right?
Absolutely.
No coincidences. My goodness. So I want to just bounce off, and obviously, like I said, we've engaged in many conversations over the last while, and obviously we've got a bit more of a broad picture with you. You're empty nesting right now at the moment.
Yep.
Your kids are, one is in Australia,
Yep.
one is in Cape Town, UCT, studying in UCT. What's that been like for you and your wife, Sheena?
Yeah, we weren't ready to have our kids smile and wave us goodbye.
Yep.
But at the same time, that's what you prepare for, right? Over all the years,
Yep.
The goal of being a good parent is you raise independent kids.
100%.
So as much as we've struggled with it, it's been a tough season. To see our kids step out and flourish has really been a blessing. So it's also allowed us to actually embrace a new season. And I think part of life is doing that. It's embracing the season that you're in. I feel like so often when we look back over our shoulder, we miss what's now.
Yeah.
And so for me, Sheen and I are actually enjoying this season. It's good for us to have a bit more time.
Yep.
We can pretty much talk about whatever we want over meals. We don't have to worry about little ears that are listening. And so there's a freedom with that, right?
Yeah.
So we're embracing it. And I think it's a good season for us.
That's lovely. Did you, obviously, you rightfully so, you said you struggled because I've seen so many parents just lose themselves in their kids. Obviously, I have young kids right now, so that's my point of reference. But I often think, my goodness, we invest so much into our children, and when they leave, like, how do we put things in place right now for our marriages that keep our marriages solid and alive when the kids leave, right?
Yeah, I think
we've also had, sorry for interrupting you, but we've had many of those conversations to say it's quite important to keep your marriage alive and flourishing.
It's to recognize that the season comes to an end, and when that season does come to an end, what is left in the relationship? And I think particularly in those early years when kids are small, and there's a lot of demands and a lot of pressure, it feels like that. It's important to prioritize your relationship.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think that is key in that is to recognize that the best gift you can give your kids is really is a stable marriage. And so if that means 2-3 times a month, you're actually out together as a couple.
Yep. Yeah.
Your kids will be okay.
Yep.
Yes, they may be disappointed in the short term, but when they come back and mom and dad are in a good place, they've spoken things through, they're healthy, that's what makes their world healthy.
Yeah.
The moment that mom and dad aren't okay, my world feels very unstable.
Yeah.
So the big picture there is to recognize the best gift you guys can give yourself is a time and space to talk things through, even when the pressure's on, especially when the pressure's on. And then as they grow up and become less dependent on you, you've got a relationship that's genuine.
Yeah.
And then that transition into the empty nester space can be good rather than frustrating or difficult.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's really, really powerful. So our conversations, obviously I've plotted out some questions for today, but I've also wanted today to be quite generic and quite just like we are when we're together, you know. One of the things that I was just thinking of right now was what is it that parents, because I find parents lose themselves within the season of life. What can they practically put in place that can have them go, they are still strong in their marriages? Because whatever, right, career comes, that takes priority. How does one balance that out? You know, you know, because there's real demands.
Sure.
Kids are. I've got 3 children. It's quite demanding, and you can get really quite overwhelmed by it all. You know.
Proverbs says a threefold cord is not easily broken, and so when there's just the 2 of you, that's maybe not ideal. So for me, I think if I was going to give any advice, it would be to make sure that you allow Jesus to weave his presence into that threefold cord. Excuse me. Allow him to be the third person in your marriage in the sense of his grace, his ability, his fruit being produced in your life. And when you do that, it's healthy, it's good. Because I think marriage, we all get to the end of ourselves. We all get to a place where I can't do this. I just don't have it. And that's where when you lean into Jesus, when he's that third strand in your marriage, whether it's the husband or the wife, you receive from him. And once you do that, you've got something to give to your marriage, to your partner, to your spouse. So without him, I don't know how people who don't have a relationship with Jesus actually do it. I don't know. But one of the things that I've just consistently done is gone back to him.
Okay. Oh, that's very interesting. So how important is it because you're talking about marriage and that God being the focus, how important is it for men to have that? Because obviously as men, we are commanded in many ways to take the lead, to love our wives as Christ loved the church. How important is it for the man to just be solidified in that identity in Christ, to lead his household, his family, himself well? Okay. How important is that? We've had these conversations in so many regards, and I've in many ways I've needed to go back to that and be reminded what the focus is when it's been challenging, when it's been like I feel like overwhelmed. How do I actually do this, you know?
So I think when we look at the garden, what went wrong between Eve and Adam was they both knew what God had said. And when Eve partook of that fruit, we know that Adam was standing right there because she turns and gives to him and he also eats, right? So they're both there. They both have heard God's leading, His directing. And what should have happened is not about who's right or who's wrong. What should have happened in that moment is, Eve, that's not what God said. And I think so often that's where we get it wrong. We want to be, well, it's about me. I'm the husband. I need to lead this home, and you must follow me.
Yes.
No.
Well, I mean, that's the way it should be.
It talks in Ephesians 5 about submitting both to the Lord.
Sure.
And what went wrong in the garden was not that Adam should have said, you're wrong and I'm right. Adam should have said, what has Jesus said? What has God told us?
Yeah.
And Eve would have gone, God has told us not to eat of this fruit. Well, then that's what we're going to do.
Sure. So there should be a bit of reminding each other, hey, wait a minute.
We're both submitted to the Lord.
Sure.
And I think the joy of being married is that God sees you as one.
100%.
So He's not going to say one thing to me and a different thing to my wife.
Yes.
We're one flesh. So God will speak one thing to me and to her. And then our job is to hear that, agree on that, and figure that out together. And I think so often we need to be able to remind. Sometimes Sheena needs to come to me and say, Alan, that's not what God told us. And I have to be confronted with that and go, you're right. And then there's times where I have to go to her and say, that's not the leading God gave us. And from there, we both follow Him. And when we follow Him, it works out beautifully. And I think that's what went wrong in the garden, is that if Adam had simply turned to Eve and said, it's not about you right or I'm right, it's what did God say?
Wow. So we got to be on the same page.
I think in our spirit, God will give us the same message.
Yep.
And it's about both of us being submitted to Him. That's why the threefold cord is so
100%,
important.
100%.
Because God is part of this marriage. I'm submitted to Him. Sheena's submitted to Him. When we both hear that,
100%.
It's impossible for me to go, I heard one thing from God, and her to hear, I heard a different thing. Why? Because we're one. That's part of the covenant.
Wow.
So when we recognize that God speaks with one voice when you're married, I'm not talking about if you're not married.
Sure.
But when you're married, you're in covenant. God sees you as one. And that becomes the blessing of being married, is that you are allowed to engage with your wife under what God is leading us.
100%.
And then it's
100%.
not about I'm right or she's right. The question really is, what has God said to us?
Sure, absolutely. Men seem to be a bit slow on the uptake, though. Like
you can speak for yourself.
It's almost like our wives are just, and we know this, right? Our wives are more intuitive. They're more connected to things. They're more obviously emotive and all the rest of it. And sometimes it takes a while for us to come around. And my thinking is that my go-to with that is just like, do your best to stay planted. Do your best to planted. Look at that. Do your best to stay connected to Christ, because we don't know it all. And when we come with a superior thing, that's why we have these women movements, right?
Sure.
Because women are like liberal and
to be fair, a lot of guys, men, Christian men, in the name of the Lord, have just been domineering bullies. That's just the truth. We're a team.
Sure.
Now, every team has a captain, right? But the truth of the matter is we're a team.
Yeah.
And in my marriage, my role is to release Sheena to do what she's amazing at, for me to do what I'm good at, and trust the Lord that the complementary areas of our lives will bring Him glory.
Wow.
But I think too many men over the years have gone, I'm the leader, you need to submit to me and do what I say. But that's not how God deals with us. Because we're also submitted, right? We're submitted to the Lord.
Sure.
And God doesn't lead me that way.
Sure.
Why would I then lead my wife that way?
Wow. I'm thinking about so many things right now that is just like mind blowing. One of the things is that just to tag team on what you were saying over there is what, and this is probably a bit of a hard one, but I in many ways needed to step down to put focus on my family, focus on my marriage, and focus on my family. From full-time ministry, now feeling a lot healthier and starting to get involved again in ministry, but just in a more balanced way, more in a healthier way. Why is it that men, particularly in ministry, are not kind of leading their families well? What is, we've seen even just in the news recently with so many different things of men of God and things that are happening and taking place, and you just think, what are we, do we not have people in our lives, accountability we mentioned earlier on, to point out and to say, are we not intuitive enough? Are we not seeking counsel? Because in my mind, we are counseling others. If you have a car that's driving, it needs its service regularly. We need to be having checkups. We need to be making sure that we are well and healthy mentally, soulishly, holistically. What is it? What is your view on it? And you've been in this for a while, and this time you took time off as well. But where are we not getting it? For me, I needed to make an extreme decision. It was extreme, but it's what was needed.
Sure.
I had a supportive wife, and we've been on that journey. A lot of highs, a lot of lows, but we've been on that journey. And so I hate to sound judgmental because like I'm in a perfect seat or whatever. But what is it, and what are we doing wrong, and where can we kind of get it right? And I'm asking a question that's very loaded.
Sure. So I think firstly to acknowledge a lot of men of God are doing a great job.
Sure.
We hear about, and the ones that make the news are the ones that aren't, right?
Sure.
But if you looked at churches across our nation, across our continent, across the world, there are hundreds of thousands of faithful pastors that are doing phenomenal jobs,
Sure.
sacrificially.
Sure.
So I think that's something to firstly recognize. Those that land up in trouble are often doing that because they don't recognize the fact that we are three parts to our being:
Sure.
spirit, soul, and body.
Sure.
The best analogy I ever heard was when I was at Bible school, actually. The lecturer said that when you drive your car, there are three dials on that dashboard. There is a dial that gives you engine pressure.
Yeah.
There's a dial that gives you water pressure.
Yep.
Or temperature. And then there's a dial that gives you the fuel gauge.
Yep.
And the goal in maintaining a good, healthy running car is that all three of those are within the specified limits.
That's good.
And I think often with the pressure of being in ministry, of too many to-do lists,
Yeah.
we sometimes lose sight of the fact that our body also has three gauges. It's a physical gauge, it's a emotional gauge, it's a spiritual gauge. And we can be spiritually amazing,
Sure.
but perhaps just physically exhausted. This car is going to eventually run out, right? It's going to stop running. Equally, you can be physically well, you can be spiritually great, but emotionally, if you're not caring for your soul, if you're not doing things that re-energize you and reinvigorate you,
Sure.
You can get to that place. And I think what underlies the reason of why we don't do that, why we don't live healthy, is because our identity so often is from what we do,
So good.
and not from who we are. And I think if there's one thing that I've really had to rework and reframe in my mind over the last, let's call it 15 years, maybe, is that it's my value is not in what I do, it's in who I am, whose I am. And to live that out takes a lot of readjusting. What it did for me and some of the pastors that I walk with, it's that, to realize I'm more than Pastor Al.
Yep.
Firstly, I'm his child.
Yeah.
I'm loved. I'm accepted.
Yeah.
I'm holy. I'm righteous.
Yeah.
And out of that space, I'm in a healthy place then to minister.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that is so powerful. That is really, really so powerful. And so, like for yourself, like you said, 15 years. How have you had to? How do you measure that, and how do you pace that within yourself? Because I know, because I have privy to your life a little bit. I know that there are seasons, but you've always seemed so, first of all, so very practical, which I've really, really enjoyed. You know, sometimes you engage with people and it's euphoric or no, but you've been really, really practical, and you seem to just have, not perfect, but to have put things in place for yourself that can. I know you go on holidays often. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I've kind of learned from you in that regard, and try to amend my life accordingly, you know. But I'm sure it's not easy. I'm sure it comes with, there's seasons, right, where you've got to navigate that.
Look, I think firstly, I've received a lot of grace from the Lord over the years, because I don't do it right all the time, and so for me, firstly, to recognize that I've had a lot of grace from Him.
Oh, that's precious.
I think, secondly, to recognize that the gospel is what frames how I live my life. And you know, you've got to be able sometimes to unpack what you mean by that. Linda.
Yes.
Because a lot of people will understand the gospel in their own frame of reference. But for me, it was probably 16, 17 years ago that I really started to really understand what the new covenant, the gospel of Jesus, actually means. If I were to sum it up, I guess for many of my early years as a believer, I was between the old covenant and the new covenant. So I'd be quite happy to talk about I'm saved by grace. I accept that my salvation moment was because of the cross, because of Jesus. But if you really interrogated my internal beliefs, I felt that my blessing from God was more because of my actions. And so the reason I had that was because so much of the old covenant is about what you do, right?
Yes.
If you do this and this and this and this, God will bless you. But there's also a reverse. It says if you don't do those things, there's a curse that goes with that, right?
Goes without saying.
And so I would often feel like I was in a little bit of a schizophrenic relationship with God based on my behavior. When I did the right thing, which I did a lot, then I would have confidence with God to go, I can receive blessing. But no one does the right all the time, do they? And so those moments where I didn't do what was right, I then had to deal with the fact of what the old covenant says, which says God's going to punish you. I mean, there's lots of examples of good people who made one or two mistakes, and boom, that was the end. And so I would often be in that state of, depending on my behavior, would determine how I would engage with God.
Sure.
But when I started to really look at the new covenant, I didn't see that. I see that in the new covenant, it's about Christ's behavior. In fact, Paul goes on to say that my righteousness is about what he did. It's not about what I did. And that was a huge shift for me, because for so many years, it had been modeled to me, it had been, and I think in many practical ways, taught to me that I'm righteous by what I do. If I do right things, I'm living righteously. If I do wrong things, I'm living unrighteously. And so the measure of righteousness was actually my behavior. But when you really start to study a lot of Paul's writings, a lot of the gospel of what the finished work of what Jesus has paid to give us, it's faith in his work that determines my righteousness.
Wow.
So the best way I can describe it is if we were to say life is about writing a test, right? if I write the test, I may get 1 or 2 out of 10. But if Jesus writes the test for me, he got 10 out of 10.
Sure.
So a big part of understanding that is Christ did not come to do away with the law. He came to fulfill the law.
Yeah.
Why did he fulfill the law? Was it because he needed to be more holy? Did he need to get closer to God? No. Christ fulfilled the law on our behalf.
Sure.
So that when he went to the cross, he was a perfect sacrifice. So it would be like Jesus writing that test of life for me. He gets 10 out of 10. And God credits me and my faith in Jesus with I get 10 out of 10. And so my righteousness is not actually in what I do. My righteousness is I believe he did it for me. That's what makes me righteous. It's a gift of righteousness. It's not a works of righteousness. And I think for years being in church, and honestly, I'm super grateful for my church heritage. Much that I've received.
Yeah, absolutely.
But somewhere in my own journey, I lost the ability to recognize my righteousness is a gift because of what Jesus has done for me. And so when I saw my righteousness as an act, as something that I need to achieve or something I need to do, I just couldn't do it. And I actually started to lose the joy of my salvation because I just couldn't live this life. It was impossible because I could do it a lot, but I couldn't do it all the time. And that's why I felt like I had this schizophrenic relationship with God. Because when I did right, I could come and receive blessing. But when I did wrong, now you're going to get punished. Now you're going to get a curse. Now like who knows what that's going to be. And so for me, I guess the journey has been to realize my righteousness is by faith in his work.
Wow.
And honestly, that has set me free because for many pastors and leaders, we would accept this intellectually. But then when you start to think about, well, if I'm righteous because of what Jesus did, does that mean I can just live any way I want? But we forget that it's a loving relationship. And my journey was, I can remember quite clearly being in a place and saying, Lord, if my righteousness is truly by what you did, that means if I were to sin today, I'm still righteous.
Sure.
That means if I were to sin today, you would still love me. And in that moment, I made a crazy decision. And I guess God's grace was there. I actually willfully did something that I knew was wrong. And I waited. And what changed my life forever was the moment where I felt God put his arms around me and say, I still love you.
That's so powerful.
And I was like, but I've just done the wrong thing. And he's like, I still love you. And that's what shifted me because I felt like, God, if you will love me in my wrongdoing, if you will love me in my sin, then you're amazing. And what that did is it put me on a path to fall more in love with him. And the result of me falling more in love with him was I actually didn't want to do the sinful things anymore.
Yeah.
It was like those things that had held me in this, don't do it, and I would do it, and then I'd feel bad, and then I'd feel guilty, and then I would do it. There was a negative cycle, right? In the midst of that, when I experienced God's love, and even though, Alan, you'll choose to willfully sin, when I received his love in that moment, I realized his love was independent of my action.
Wow.
His love was independent on my obedience. And when I started to open my heart to that, I actually wanted to please him. I started to get to the place where instead of working for his approval, I received his approval. Instead of trying to be good enough for his love, I just accepted that he loved me. And that set me up to actually fall more in love with him.
Yep.
And because of that, I actually got to a place where I started to live more in line with the gospel than I'd ever done in my life. And then I started to feel, but if that works for me, this can work for other people because God is not a respecter of persons.
Absolutely.
And so for
My
me,
goodness.
my journey over the last 15 years has really been on helping people understand how much God loves them. And it's independent of your best efforts. That's in fact the whole point of the gospel, right? The gospel is, I couldn't do this.
Yeah.
Jesus came and did it for me. My faith in him getting 10 out of 10 on the score is what qualifies me
Yeah.
to come boldly into the
Yeah.
presence of God,
Yeah.
not only when I've done good,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
in fact, when
Yeah.
I've done wrong,
Yeah.
and come into his presence and
My
go, Lord,
goodness. That's just,
I'm here righteous and holy and accepted because of the work of Jesus. My journey with that was I fell more in love with God. I literally, it felt like my heart was just growing because, do you really love me? You're so good. And then I realized that that's actually what Romans speaks about. It's the goodness of God that
Yeah.
leads me to repentance.
my goodness.
And when we understand that as pastors and as leaders, we don't have to bash people on the head
Yep.
to get, in fact, doing that actually it's counterproductive. It doesn't bring about change. Because if it did, the law would have worked, right?
100%.
The 10 Commandments would have worked,
100%.
but it didn't.
Sure.
Which is why Jesus had to come, he was born of a woman under the law, fulfilled the law on our behalf. He wrote the test. He got 10 out of 10. My faith in him is credited to me getting 10 out of 10. And I sit back and go, God, how good are you? And I fall more in love with him. And then out of a loving relationship, I am fulfilled. I am receiving what I need from God.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I stop working. Does that make sense?
It feels like this is another gospel. It feels, there's something that you've said to me in our conversations. Often you've said to me, there's a difference between grace a lot and grace alone. And many years of being on stage, there's a sense of, and it's not said or you have to, but within yourself, you want to do your best, but there's elements of performance. There's elements of, I want to do my best.
Sure.
And of course, we all want to do
Sure.
our best, but it's a switch in your head that you need to be this type of person. And God's anointing was always there, and his grace was always there upon it. And when I felt I was going off or whatever, I'd try to just kind of bring myself back with good counsel and all the rest of it. But this kind of frees you up, right? To just be like, hey, the results are not, I'm going to do my best, of course, but the results are not based on me. It's not based on what, it's like whatever happens, happens. It kind of takes the pressure off, right?
Absolutely. My pastor, Pastor Josh, uses this analogy. He says, if you're in the circus and you're on that trapeze, that high wire, he said, when there's a safety net, it sets those guys up there to have a go. Why? Because even if I have a go and I miss, that safety net will catch me, right? If there's no safety net, you're only ever going to do the most basic, because if you miss your jump,
So beautiful.
if you miss your catch, you're falling and getting severely injured. And so what you find with the gospel of grace is that we have a recognition that we can give it our full go.
It's beautiful.
What if I fail? Well, his grace will catch me. But what if I don't? What if I get up on that high wire? What if I do the triple somersault and the one-handed grab? What if I pull that off? And I think that's what understanding the gospel of grace does for us, is it frees us up from the fear of failure, to actually embrace who we are and to live life the way God intended it to be lived.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. You've mentioned to me in times past that, because my question to you, and when I hear the message of grace, something within me goes, this is right. This is, you've had preaching all your life, and certain parts of your life it's grace, and like you rightfully said, certain parts of your life is a little bit law, but this, your soul, your spirit just takes to it, and it's like, yes, this is truth. when you are receiving a mixed gospel, in certain environments, and we've chatted about this, why is it that pastors, because first of all, if pastors are set free, right, it really would help their congregations in this regard. And nobody's perfect, and we're all on a journey. I know Pastor Ray used to always say, put faith, add faith to your faith.
Yes.
But why is it that pastors are not fully engaged in this message, and maybe need to be taught, maybe need to be highlighted, and what do they stand? You've often said to me they stand the risk of losing control.
Yeah. Well, I think it is a challenge. Having pastored in the space where I was a little bit law and a little bit grace, I think part of it is that you can use the law to really create fear, because that's what the law does. Mm-hmm. And with fear, you can use that to actually control behavior. So if somebody would come and sit in my office, I could, perhaps they were in a tough time, perhaps things were difficult in their marriage. I could say things like, do you know that God hates divorce? And subtly what I'm doing is I'm using the law to create a sense of fear. Well, I don't want God to hate me. Well, then stay married. So I would use the law to create fear to control behavior. And I think all of us have got the capacity to do that. The challenge is that when you embrace the gospel, the 1 John actually talks about the fact that perfect love casts out fear. And so when you embrace the gospel of Jesus has made me righteous, I'm fully loved, I'm fully accepted, you no longer have to perform. You don't have to use the law to be good enough. You then don't have the fear of not being good enough because I actually have been made good enough. And then I'm really able to respond to God's love. And so when we really embrace that message, I can't get up then on a Sunday and use the law to create a fearful environment to control people's behavior. And that actually sets me free, because what I do then is I can directly engage people with their Lord and Savior. I don't have to be in the middle. People don't have to come through me to, why? Because they need to come through to Jesus. And in that direct communication, He can speak to their hearts. He can lead them. He can guide them directly. And my goal is then not to tell people what to do. My goal is to point them to Him and ask the question, what is He telling you to do? Now, sometimes people aren't certain. Sometimes they don't know how to hear God. And then I can help them with that.
Yes.
But it's not my place to direct people. It's not my place to say how much you give or don't give. It's not my place to say where you should live or not live. Do I take this job or not take this job? I don't know. But your shepherd, He knows.
Yeah.
Ask Him.
Yeah.
Let Him lead you. Let Him guide you. And then out of that space, people are free to receive direction. They receive His love. They receive the gift of righteousness.
Yeah.
And out of that space, things shift and change. I'm no longer afraid of being punished by an angry God, because my sins are forgiven.
Yes.
And in that space, I can come to Him, not out of, am I good enough, but I can come to Him going, I know You've made me good enough. Lord, will You lead me? Will You guide me? Will You show me what to do?
Oh, that's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. So how can we continually, because you've done that with me. You've said to me, Lyndon, when I've had certain challenges, either my kids or marriage or calling or destiny or way forward, purpose, you've often said to me, what is God doing? Which really, sometimes it's been frustrating, because I'm like, just give me an answer. Because I want to, quick fix life, right? Quick fix life, the McDonald's lifestyle, that, I want it all, I want it now type thing, No, that's actually a song. That's something else. But anyways, but yeah, sometimes it does just take us to be leading, go back to Christ and what is He saying, and like you said, if you don't know, I can help you facilitate in areas of, are you spending the quality time with the Lord? Are you putting certain things in place and all the rest of it, which is really, really so beautiful. How important is it for men to, obviously I'm a father and I have the context of manhood and fathering. How important is it for men to just, you've directed me even to therapy and just helped in so many different ways, but how important is it for men to just get their stuff together? I'm tempted to use another word, but those who know me would
Be shocked.
Would be shocked, yeah. But really, I say that because honestly, I've had to look at myself in that way and go, but I just see it so fundamentally important for men in particular to kind of at least be open to getting your stuff together.
So I think the truth of the matter is none of us have got our stuff together. That's the whole point of why Jesus came to die. And so anybody who pretends or projects that they've got life completely figured out and worked out, it's just not the truth.
Yep.
Which is why we need a shepherd. We are sheep. It's not a flattering analogy, right? To be likened to a sheep. Sheep are dumb. Yep. Sheep get lost. Sheep get hurt. Sheep lose their way. Sheep get stuck in holes. I mean, that's so the reason you have a shepherd is because sheep can't look after themselves.
Yeah.
They go off on their own way. So for me, the key here is come back to your shepherd.
Sure.
And as a man, I think the first part of recognizing a different way forward is to recognize I don't have it together. That's why we come to the cross in the first place.
Sure.
But the moment that I give my life to the Lord, the moment I submit to Him, the moment I receive salvation, so many things shift, so many things change. And in that moment, the rest of the work doesn't need to be done in my spirit because I am a new man. I've been made new. What needs to shift is that other part of our being, which is our soul.
Yep.
Now what needs to change is my thinking in line with what Jesus has done. And if I don't change my thinking, I get stuck in who I'm not.
Yep.
Because God's made me new, right? God's given me complete new start. My sins are forgiven. He's made me righteous. He's made me holy. Paul writes, he starts all his letters by using the word saints. We don't see ourselves as saints. Saint is someone holy who lived 100 years ago, who was amazing.
It's identity, isn't it?
Right. So when I know that I'm a saint, God calls me a saint. I know that my sins are forgiven. I know that I have the gift of righteousness. When I start to know that's who I am, I live out of that. And then I start to live differently. But first it starts with me thinking differently. I don't think of myself as someone who doesn't have my stuff together. Even though when I look at my behavior, I see that from time to time. The work is in this process called renewing of your mind. This process, Jesus used the word metanoia. In our English Bible, it's often translated as repentance.
Yes.
But in the Greek, it doesn't carry that meaning. Metanoia carries a meaning of change your thinking.
Sure.
So a big part of the work after salvation is changing our thinking to line up with the work of Jesus. And when we do that, our lives start to change. Men start to operate from who they are, and out of that, their behavior changes to, I'm a child of God. I am a son of God. I'm righteous. So instead of thinking, I'm a sinful bloke and I can't control myself, I start to think, I'm righteous. And out of my righteous gift that I've been given from Christ, I start to live more righteously. And the more I live that, the better my behavior becomes. Because that's often what people often will accuse the gospel about is if you tell people that they're forgiven, that they're righteous, that you give them a free pass to sin. No, there's no free pass to sin, because the price of that, of my sins being forgiven, was massive. It was the most expensive price that could have been paid. It was the life of Jesus. So when I recognize this is not a free pass to not sin, there was great cost in my sin being forgiven. What I need to then do is recognize Jesus has done this new work. I am a new creation. I've got to now, moving forward, change my thinking in line with that. And that then changes my behavior to line up with God's word. So our experience is that when people go through this process, in fact, what happens over time is they start to live more and more holy lives because it's out of who I am.
Sure.
It's out of an identity that Jesus has given me. I'm no longer trying to be holy. I am holy, and I live out of that.
That's beautiful.
But it takes time. That doesn't happen in one day.
And the scary thing is our world, particularly for our younger generation, our world is instant, right? Let's have the change. Let's have it happen now. Let's do this right now, instant. But that's not how God works, right? Well, and I think that's why people gotta go, it's not for me.
Well, your salvation is instant. So that there's a change that happens spiritually that is instantaneous. But the working out of that is a changing of your thinking, which does take time.
Yes. So how would you encourage people? You've often said to me, be under the word of grace, be under receiving from the Lord, receiving from that place. Would you encourage people along the same line? Because we were laughing 2 weeks ago when we chatted, and you said to me that often, especially the younger generation, they would take this and they would run with it and kind of go back to their churches and go, my pastor's preaching the wrong thing, And I guess there's maturity that needs to take place in there. I guess my point is, how would you encourage people then to take this and to work with it? And because, like, if you look at that, there's a bunch of undoing that needs to be done, right?
Absolutely.
A bunch of renewing, a bunch of letting go, a bunch of that's actually.
So you alluded to it in one of your earlier questions, and I didn't really answer it. But there is a big difference between grace a lot and grace alone. Now, almost every church will have a lot of grace and a bit of law, and the amount or the ratio varies, right? But if you only have the law, all you're left with is the Jewish Old Testament. So almost every church that exists has an element of the gospel, the grace of the finished work of Jesus, and certainly for salvation. Where it went wrong for me was I was okay with my salvation being under grace, but my blessing needed to be earned. The provision of God, the blessing that you have was, I felt, based on my behavior. And that's a very old covenant way of looking at things. But we live in the new covenant, right?
Yes.
So under the new covenant, what we should be hearing and thinking about is the work of Jesus.
Sure.
That
doesn't disregard, sorry for interrupting, that doesn't disregard taking responsibility for your, it's not like, hey, grace, we're all cool, we're all good.
No.
You're still taking responsibility, keeping to your commitments, your.
Sure. I think you've got to distinguish that there's a difference between the grace that the Lord gives me and the grace that other people will give me. So if I go out and cheat on my business partner today, God will forgive me. But that may be the end of my business relationship.
100%.
Right? If
100%.
I go out and get angry and shoot someone and kill them, God will forgive me.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
But I may have to go to court. I may need to go to jail to pay the price for my behavior. So I think we've got to recognize, but when this is good, when I have peace with God, Colossians says I have peace with God.
Yes.
Because of the work of Jesus.
Yes.
When I have that, it sets me free to receive his love, to align my thinking with what Jesus has done. 100%. And when that takes place, my behavior slowly but steadily shifts. And it shifts more in line with the fruit of the gospel. my behavior becomes, in that sense, more Christian.
Sure.
Because it's aligning with that finished work.
Sure. That's beautiful. Now, once I've received and started to take this in, I can be in certain settings where I can go, that feels a little bit off. That I'm not sure if that. Where did that come from? You are. I think your antennas are a little bit more apt to go. That's. So how do we deal with that?
So I think it's to recognize that it's the gospel that brings about the change that we're looking for. So listen to the gospel. Don't get sucked back into mixture. I like the word mixture because you have a lot of New Testament but a little bit of Old. Old always points you back to you, what you must do.
That's so good.
The new always points you to what Jesus has done. And so when you are feeding off sermons or the word, if you're left feeling like, I've got to do more, I've got to pray more, I recognize that that's leading you back into an old covenant space. The new covenant is about what Jesus has done. That's what he did. That's what he's made me. And when you start to think in line with that, you then have the supernatural life that God called us to live. That's how we're able to live and overcome our challenges. That's how we're able to overcome the sin that has become habitual in our lives. That's how we're able to overcome the wounds that we thought were terminal. No, I just recognize that's not who I am. I've been through stuff, but Jesus has made me new. He's given me a new start.
And I've seen you use that, but I've seen you minister even into my life in regards to that. Going, Lyndon, you got to be receiving from the Lord. You need to be at His feet, receiving what is He saying, what is He wanting you to do. And I've seen you practically work that out. So this is not something foreign or whatever. This is something that's really, really real to you and in your life, and it's just absolutely beautiful. Thank you for your time today.
Sure.
Thank you for coming through.
I love talking about the gospel because it's changed me.
Sure.
There was a season in full-time ministry, there was a season where I'm serving other people, that the gospel was no longer good news to me because it pointed me to me, and I failed often. And so if all I was going to get from God was when I did good, I was blessed, but when I did bad, I was punished, that wasn't good news to me anymore.
Yeah.
And although if you'd have challenged me in those moments, I would have said, of course I believe the gospel, of course. But the fruit of my life was I had stopped really believing it was good news.
Yep.
And I know that was because I'd stopped inviting my world to church.
Oh, okay.
I was working in church, I was surrounded by church, but the gospel was no longer good news to me.
It became dead. It became boring.
I just felt like I can't do it. So why am I inviting people in? The moment
that makes sense.
The moment I shifted to the gospel is good news. Look how good God is. God has forgiven me. He's given me a new start. He's washed me. He's cleansed me. The moment that I allowed my heart to be captured by the love of a great Father who paid the ultimate price bring me into redemption, to ransom me, I fell in love with Him again. And then the gospel became good news because even though I don't deserve it, even though I'm not good enough, even though I fail, God still loves me. God still blesses me. God still is going to cause good things to happen to me. All of a sudden, wherever I went, Lyndon, I started to talk about the gospel. I started to tell people how good Jesus is, how good God is, how much He loves them, because I had a fresh revelation of that. And that's why, for me, it's like stay in the gospel. Just stay in the new covenant. Just stay in that space because it's changed my life.
Sure.
And it's changed the way I live. And that's what I want for people.
Sure. I remember, and we'll wrap up in a minute or two. I remember ministering out of a sense of obligation and trying to lead someone to Christ and thinking, okay, let me do this, and do you know that? And the guy looked at me and said, are you okay? And I thought, okay, this is such an effort. This is so hard. But I know it's right. I know this is what we should do. But it was from that place of this is what I have to do. Obligation. Because I know it's right.
Yeah.
My heart was, I guess, sincere in where it was at. But it was just so totally...
And how different when you've experienced God's goodness.
Sure.
And it's true to you.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Then it's like, what's different about you?
Absolutely.
It's a different conversation.
Yeah. And I know that you said to me, because I said to you 2 weeks ago, that just changes the game. Like, and I know hearing this, it sounds so simple, but it just changes the game. It changes how you love your kid, look after your kids. It changes how it changes how you preach, how you minister, why you minister.
Sure.
Your relationship with your children, relationship with your wife, it changes like everything. It's not just, okay, this is the secluded thing in your life. It changes everything. I think to wrap up, Pastor Al, if you wouldn't mind, just to encourage us, those of us who are really struggling, there's people who may be watching today who do not know Jesus, and those who are on the journey, and this just bears weight with them. They're like, I'm in whatever I'm in this church and background, but I need that. How could we, number one, encourage people who are not born again, do not know Jesus? And then number two, those who are maybe stuck including myself in certain areas within my life. So you're encouraging me too, but those who are stuck in certain patterns of law and religion and tradition, how can we it's not us, it's the Holy Spirit, but how can we set them free in that thinking?
So I think firstly, those who don't know Jesus, it's a choice to receive love. The very definition of love is that there needs to be a choice.
Sure.
I mean, if I fell in love with my wife 30 odd years ago, if I'd have kidnapped her, put her in the boot of my car, driven to a remote location and said, I love you and I'm going to spend the rest of my life with you, irrespective of how you feel, we'd recognize
something's wrong.
That's maybe not love.
You'd be locked up, yeah.
Well, if they found me.
If they found you, yeah.
But we recognize that that's not love.
Sure.
And God deals with us the same way. He doesn't force. He doesn't
That's beautiful.
manipulate. He waits for a choice. And I think the key thing, most of us would recognize this verse. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. So the truth of the matter is God's already made his move, right?
Yep. Yeah.
He's gone, I love the whole world. I've paid the ransom. I've done everything. But he waits for us to choose.
Sure.
So to recognize it's a choice. And once you've chosen, I want to respond to that love. The book of Romans talks about two things that are needed. To believe in your heart, that's faith.
Yes, sir.
And I believe that just talking about the gospel, you may find that if you're watching today and you haven't responded, today you've found, like talking about the goodness of God, you have faith in your heart. Then you respond on that faith by speaking out what you believe. Romans says, believe in your heart, confess with your mouth. Faith's there, just speak it out. And you can do that. You can just say, Lord, I want to have faith in what Jesus has done for me. I want to receive the gift of forgiveness of my sins, the gift of salvation. Come and do a new work in me. And just doing that, just speaking that out, will bring you into relationship with Jesus.
Amen. And the next steps that they could take, we're gonna put some information in this podcast.
Sure,
but the next steps that they can
get
take.
in a local church that preaches the gospel. Recognize that whenever you're left with stuff that you have to do, I have to do this, I have to do more. That's not the gospel. That's a works program. But when you are left, having listened to sermons, having received the preaching of the word, you should be left with, this is what Jesus has done. This is who I am.
Yeah.
This is the finished work. When I'm left with that, I fall more in love with him.
Absolutely.
And when I'm in love with him, living that out just becomes an extension of who I am.
Absolutely. And so to encourage those people who are in religion and tradition, that's exactly what we would say, right? Is get to that place of receiving.
So one of the things that truly helped me, like was instrumental in that journey for me, was a book by Pastor Prince called Destined to Reign.
Destined to Reign,
Name of the
that's
book.
Right, yes.
That book challenged me, and he's actually written one that I think is a little bit more contemporary. It's called The Gospel Revolution.
All right.
And that is a great book for you to be able to read and just reframe your thinking in line with the finished work of Jesus.
Beautiful. I really appreciate that you've come
Thank you.
through today.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
I loved it. Loved talking about the gospel.
Thank you.
Cool, man.
So if you've tuned in today, thank you for coming through. And notes will be in the show notes, and have a look out. Any information you need will be in there. Please hit us up and let us know if you enjoyed this podcast and there's something more that you would like to hear. Please recommend this to others. And if you have any input or any suggestions, please let me know. This is Lyndon Peterson, and we're talking about what happens beyond the stage. God loves you. I love you, and take care.